Okay, full disclosure. I'm a millennial and I'm proud of it. This will not be your typical rant about employee millennials that I hear way too often, and I bet you hear those kinds of rants as well. I've heard so many business owners and managers complain about my generation, and it really gets on my nerves. My business is all millennials, except for my husband, who is a Gen Xer. And I've been the main interviewer and trainer in our business for over 5 years. And I've learned a few things that I hope you'll find useful. Before I jump into those, first of all, let me be clear on 3 points. One, every generation has its good attributes and its quirks. Millennials, no different than other generations in that respect. We have good points and bad points. Two, generations aren't that different from one another. We're all still human and like 99% the same. Even though millennials are like digital natives and we don't know the world without a personal computer, we're still not all that different from previous generations. And then the third thing, the way millennials are isn't all our fault. We were raised by someone. We were nurtured to be the way that we are, some for better and some for worse, just like every other generation. And that means we can be nurtured to be even better versions of ourselves. We can go from a good generation to a great generation, which is a good segue for the thing that really gets to me. I get so frustrated by all these barriers that business owners and managers put between themselves and their millennial staff. Lots of boomer and Xer and even some millennial business leaders think that to be a leader or a manager means that you have to put some space between themselves and their staff. They have to get inaccessible and act higher and mightier or whatever. They start to act like it's their way or the highway. Leaders are meant to lead, and for many leaders, their definition of leadership is skewed. I believe the key to working with millennial staff and to healthy leadership is to remove these barriers and to be authentic. And to be authentic, communication is key. Actually talking, maybe even texting when you can't talk face to face. You don't have to take it to the level of like family, and you can still set clear boundaries, but you have to communicate. Let me say that again. You have to communicate. Leaders communicate. You have to take the time. And this phrase is one of the most important that I've heard. Be efficient with things, but effective with people. I guess this idea comes from Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But I must have heard it from someone else because I've never read this book. And I Googled it to find out, where does this idea come from? To be efficient with things, but effective with people. But because I know this to totally be true. When you're efficient with people, you're beginning to treat people like means to an end instead of persons worthy of dignity and respect. And no one wants to be treated like means to an end. No one wants to be treated efficiently, millennials or otherwise. So what does being effective with people look like? And how is that different than being efficient with people? I have some tips today for hiring and working with millennial staff effectively. And these tips would probably also be helpful with your team in general, whether you employ millennials or Xers or boomers or the post-millennials coming up or whatever it is. So here's my 5 tips. 1, take the time during interviewing and onboarding to really hear their story. I have a list of, the standard interview questions about work history and self-assessment and future expectations, but I also have a few fun questions at the end. These help break the ice even more, and I get to know how the interviewee responds to unexpected questions that they wouldn't normally see in an interview. And these are more relationship building questions too, and I get to see how they respond to those. One of my favorite questions is, how do you like to communicate? face-to-face, phone call, text, email? What's your preferred method of communication? And this is beginning to show them that I want to communicate with them and in a way that works for both of us. Then later, after this interview, when we decide that, this is someone we want to hire, before they jump into the job and actually start performing the tasks at hand, I personally sit down with them for 2 to 3 hours and we talk through the employee handbook and I tell them stories and I hear more about their story. And this is huge for building trust both ways. And it sets up the expectations for communication. These 2 to 3 hours are highly effective and they're not efficient. 2 to 3 hours one-on-one with staff, or sometimes 2-on-1, depending on how many people are hired. It's not efficient, but it's highly effective. Excuse me, and it makes a huge difference. When I have not done it, those employees have a much, much harder time overall. Second tip, check in as often as possible just to see how they're doing. Again, not efficient, but effective. Ask, how have things been going for you lately? Actually, listen to their answer. Check back in about, some major things going on in their lives, like a breakup or new dating relationships or car troubles or whatever. Ask their plans for the weekend or the holidays. This isn't just being nice. Their personal life can affect their work. There have been times when staff have been going through something truly horrible, and I've been frustrated by their performance, sometimes to the point of actually wanting to fire them. Once I hear what's really going on, because I've asked this question, how are things going for you lately? We can figure out how to improve from there. This has literally helped people keep their jobs. Again, not efficient, but effective. Take a genuine interest in them as humans, not just employees. Remember, they are not means to your business ends. They are people and deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Tip number 3, give them your cell phone number. Every single person on my staff has my phone number. They can reach me anytime that they want or need. And they know I have boundaries. They know I won't text after 9 p.m. unless it's a true emergency. And they're good about keeping that boundary. I don't get a huge number of texts or phone calls. And when I do, it's almost always important. And from what I can tell, just knowing that I'm accessible and that I want to hear from them when they have important things they want to share, that has tremendous value. Tip number 4, be clear about your open door policy. During training, I am very, very clear that I want employees to feel comfortable with coming to me to discuss anything. I suggest asking if it's good timing, when they come. I warn them that if they're interrupting something, a big project that I'm working on, then I might be like, oh, now's not the right time. How about in 15 minutes when I wrap this up? Or how about at the end of your shift rather than at the beginning, or whatever it is. But I reassure them that I definitely want to talk to them and appreciate that they are reaching out to let me know that they have something they want to discuss. So be clear about having an open door policy and that you want to hear from them. And then my 5th and final tip, set clear expectations and explain why you have these expectations and the consequences to not meeting the expectations. With regard to their work responsibility, it might seem contrary to popular opinion, but I highly recommend setting clear expectations. For example, if you want them to show up on time, and that's an expectation of their work, tell them you want them to show up on time. If you want them at their desk, if you want your employees at their desk by 9 a.m. or clocked in and working at the time that they're on the schedule for, make that clear during their training and explain why it is important. And if you don't have logical reasons, you'll probably get pushback from, smart millennials. So take the time to really think this through. Why do you have these expectations? Why should they show up on time? And make it about the team. If it affects others' ability to get their jobs done or leave on time or whatever, you definitely can't use reasons like because I said so or because that's how we've always done it. And here's the most important part about clear expectations. After you set the expectations and you explain why that expectation is important, you need to share the consequences of not meeting that expectation And you have to be willing to go through with those consequences. What will happen if they show up late once? What will happen if they chronically are late to work? What should they do if they are going to be late for an unknown circumstance? Figure these things out and be ready to follow through. The worst thing that you can do is set the expectations and make them really clear, explain why, and then you explain the consequences, and then they don't meet those expectations, and you don't follow through with the consequences. That makes these consequences empty threats. And when the worst thing you can do is to share the consequences and not follow through with them when they're warranted. Okay, I'm going to stop my rant now. I hope you found something useful here. I recommend just trying one thing that I've shared and give it time for its full effect. We have a transcript of this video on our blog below the video. If you're seeing this on YouTube, or if you're seeing it on our blog, just scroll down. You can see a transcript to review some of the things that I shared, and just choose one thing to start right away with your current employees or the next one that you hire. And then I invite you to comment and share what you decide to do, or if there's other tips that you have that you'd love to share with people about hiring millennials and working with them. I'd love to hear, but more importantly, you're also more likely to do what you put in the comments that you want to do or are doing if when you put it out there for others to know. And so it can be kind of a commitment that you're making. And if you need some individualized strategies for you and your staff, I'd love to set up a time for a half-hour strategy session by phone. And I'm going to put a link in the description of this video if you're seeing it on YouTube, or at the end of the transcript if you're seeing this on our blog. And I'd love to talk with you for about a half hour to strategize what's working and not working for you in your workplace, particularly with working with millennials. I will be back to you next Monday with another blog post or video blog. Still getting used to doing these videos, but I do enjoy this, and I look forward to talking to you then. Keep overflowing. Peace.